Morning, everyone. It is 6:30 and I'm going to call the January 14th, 2025 Borough Council Work Session to order. Second order of business is a pledge of allegiance led by Mr. McGinnis.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have a few announcements. First one being a public hearing will be scheduled for January 15th, tomorrow, for the Transportation Advisory Committee Ordinance Amendment. By the way, amendments and notices can be found on the website. Second, announce the vacancy on the Westchester Borough Planning Commission. There is a borough residency requirement. The Civil Service Commission, the alternate position, there's also a borough residency requirement for that. Lastly, announcing the newly formed Transportation Advisory Committee will meet the second Tuesday of each month. Move on to comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding items that are not on the agenda.
Tom Walsh, Chairman of the Westchester Historical Commission. On July 11th, 2024, the Lafayette Bicentennial began as Lafayette left France for his celebrated tour of the United States of America. He arrived off Sandy Hook, New Jersey, on August 16th, 2024. He is scheduled to arrive in Westchester on Saturday, July 26, 2025. On this day, 200 years ago, he was on an extended stay in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. We will keep you posted as to his whereabouts as he heads to Westchester. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay, we will move on to reports and presentations. There are none this evening, so we'll move on to old business, approving the minutes of the December 17th and December 18th Borough Council meetings. Any comments? Okay, it's like a 5-0. Moving on to new business. First item is the Borough Westchester Boards and Committees interviews. This is for the Westchester Library Board, and we have two candidates, Denise Polk, who's joining us via the internet, and Norman Crandall. Both are residents. We'll begin with Ms. Polk. Good evening, Ms. Polk. Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very
Yes,
much.
can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. So please
I'm
tell
still
us.
at the, I'm still at the airport, so if it's a little noisy in the background, I apologize. Can you still hear me? Hello?
We hear you.
Okay, thank you. Barely. Let me see if I can. You're on speakerphone. As loud as I can get you.
Okay, can you hear us now?
No, let me see if I can try to take you off speakerphone and just talk through the. Can you hear me? And then let me see if I can hear you better. I can't hear you at all this way.
Okay, can you hear us speaking now?
Yes, I can. Loud and clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. If you wouldn't mind briefly telling us about your interest in serving on the library board.
Sure. Well, it starts from a very young age. I have been always a lover of the library and have, my mom used to take me every week, even before I could read. And so I've always been a patron of public libraries wherever I've lived. And I live just a few blocks away from the library, and I regularly attend events and check things out and have made donations to the library. I think having access to books and other types of periodicals and other types of media, as well as access to the internet for those who can't afford it or at home, is vitally important.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Any questions from council, from Ms. Polk?
I have one question. Ms. Polk, can you hear me? It's Bernie Flynn.
I can hear you, Bernie. Thank you.
With with your lifestyle of a lot of travel, it seems, are you going to be able to be present in person during the necessary meetings for the library board?
And that's very interesting because I haven't traveled on an airplane in 2 years. And it just so happens that I went to visit family in Ohio over Christmas. And then my brother and I had been planning or had been talking about traveling and for over 30 years. And this is the first time we've done a trip together. So I have no other upcoming planned itineraries to be leaving town. So I see no problem with me being able to make the meetings.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
You're welcome.
Okay, Ms. Polk, we appreciate your time, especially after jumping off an airplane. We have another candidate to talk to this evening, and we will make a
Yes.
decision and let you know after tomorrow.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Safe travels.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Move on to Norman.
Thank you for considering me for the position. And to the general idea of why, very similar to what she said, early young age. And I don't know, presumably, well, I know you were brought up here in Westchester because we had that discussion a couple months ago. The whole idea is I remember my first library card. It was red and then a white rectangle, and it had Norman A. Crandall Jr., 10151 Lamar Avenue, Overland Park, Kansas. And the first two books I checked out, one was Dr. Seuss, Horton Hears a Who, and then the second was about piñatas, which for a 6.5-year-old kid, my mother's looking at me like, you're crazy. But not for my 7th, but for my 8th birthday, we made a piñata loosely. It didn't even resemble a balloon, but basically it did. Anyway, from there on in, the first 1970, every week, we started going on Saturday morning to the library up in Overland Park, Kansas. And you got to get to different books. You got to do biography. Remember the biographies? What do we call it? Mary Beth McLeod, Thomas Alva Edison. It was the same series. Well, you're shaking no, but I'm 61, so they were probably retired by the time you came along. But that was the fun part of going to the library and seeing, different books. And what we got, Erasmus of Rotterdam, he basically said a library is, what was it he said, is your paradise, because it creates a whole new world for you. And that is what needs to be done with the Westchester Library. And it's already being done, but it needs to continue. And that's why they had that, I believe, the campaign, the 150th campaign to keep it on, is to extend that joy to the next generation. Because you have a jewel in the crown of the library or Westchester. It's not a box store. How many people have gone down to the Exton Library? It's a nice library. Right. And at which point, it's like a geode. It's plain on the outside, but you knock it up and then it's got all the stories, all the access, all the resources inside. Well, the Westchester Library has that, plus the charm of the building itself, donated by Hannah Darlington. It's really neat. My wife was brought up here, and so we would come up here. We moved from Atlanta, and we brought our kids. One's in Henderson, one's now at Temple. But when they were 5 and 8, and my wife was showing the kids, oh, this is a library I used to go to. And the children's section is really neat. I mean, if you go up to the second floor of the library, you're expecting Meg Ryan to come out and lead story time because it is charming. It is neat. And so the whole idea of the library, and especially this library, you have smaller amount of space, but because of the internet today, the whole idea is the library is our interface. The Chester County Library System is Amazon. So you don't have to go to drive to Kennett Square, to get a library book, or to Exton. You can go online to your app, check out your holds, check out your checkouts, and then, oh, this other library has it within the system. I can get it, and within 2 to 5 days, you get the library book that you want. And that's what needs to be sold to the residents of Westchester and the greater Westchester area, because the library also serves, the surrounding townships.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your interest in it. And council, any questions from anyone?
I have one question for him. Since he's such a passionate library guy, how about explain the Dewey Decimal System to us?
Well, yeah.
I'm just teasing.
Yeah, right. And
I
that's just it.
couldn't use it in
college, I did work study.
1962,
Yes.
and I can't use it in 2024. So,
Very
but
complicated.
only you would remember the Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those little cards that drove you nuts. And I put them in the wrong spot when I put them back, not knowing they're.
Yes, because the more numbers you get, that's what confuses you. It's
Exactly.
like, wait a minute.
So
where's
anyway.
this go? Yeah.
Dewey Decimal.
Yep. Thank you. Any more questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Appreciate it. Council, any, want to talk about this tomorrow evening? Any decisions tonight?
I'm fine with tomorrow.
I'll ponder till tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate the interest in serving on these volunteer committees. Important that we keep filling these up. So thank you. All right, we will move on to the ACT Committee motions and discussions.
Okay, Act Committee, B1, motion to approve revising Borough Council Committee meetings. So this actually was discussed in December, came up, got kicked back to committee. We discussed it again. And by committee recommendation 3-0, we made the recommendation that we would just swap 2 of our current committee meetings scheduled on Wednesdays. We would just move the Finance Committee ahead of the Smart Growth Committee meeting, largely because of the amount of complex items that are discussed in Smart Growth. They tend to outweigh what's discussed in finance. So it's more of just it's more of a time management issue. But we suggested that change, and the committee recommended that 3-0. So we'd like to move that to our consent agenda for tomorrow night. Mr. Moni.
I have some
Comment.
thoughts. I have a couple thoughts. First of all, I mean, I'll just speak. I know Lisa Dorsey is probably the most affected by this move at this point in time, and she's not loving it. So I don't know if we want to give her the opportunity to weigh in at some point in time so she can give a little bit more of her perspective. That would be one thing. But the other thing, and so that's one thing to think about. The other thing I was looking at was, one of the reasons that Brian with an I wants to flip this is because he doesn't like coming in for the public safety at 5:30 and then having to sit through Smart Growth and then having to come back at finance after Smart Growth. What this flip essentially does is takes that onus or that burden away from Brian and puts it on Lisa. Lisa comes in for the she comes in for public safety, has to sit through finance, and then has to join smart growth. And it puts finance in between for her. So at the very least, I would recommend that we put finance and public safety next to each other, and then public safety and smart growth next to each other, so that neither of these folks have to come in and come to a meeting, sit through the middle of another one to wait, and then join the other one. They have the opportunity, if they don't have the time to sit through and listen in on the other meeting, that they can, they don't have to. But because right now it's creating that same scenario. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me, but I feel like everybody, at some point, we're all going to be in some situation like that. It's not going to work out perfectly for everyone's schedule. This was mainly a recommendation that was based on the length of time that we are generally here until the hours in the evening, to try to move some things around to make the committee meetings more efficient and end closer to when we would expect them to. Had nothing to do with all those personal things. I totally understand schedules. That was the genesis for the change in the order, but we did not factor in anybody's personal calendars, schedules, et cetera, into that recommendation. So thank you for your comments. I don't have a rebuttal to what you said because the committee made a recommendation. So I don't see any reason to change the recommendation of the committee. We can go back and talk about it again. I don't know if it's going to change their recommendation.
I also would say that finance has been moved around a couple of times. It's not the first time you've moved finance around. And finance was moved to the last because all the other issues required other people to be here in the audience. Whereas finance, not so much. But there is a time where finance, and there's several times, twice in the year, where finance gets very long and very tedious to go through. So finance was switched to the end of the night when it required less audience participation. So I don't know if this decision, I don't know if it's personal or impersonal, but I don't think it's the right decision.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I do have a comment. So the original reason why finance and smart growth were switched was because of the meetings, how long they took. Mr. Flynn was there when me and Mr. Allen were there, and our meetings drug on. And so we moved them later on after the Smart Growth Committee meetings. So that's the whole genesis of it. Again, this is just to make the meetings efficient and ensuring that they're going to be starting on time. And the Finance Committee meeting has never started on time in the last year, and that's been documented. And so what we're trying to do is people know, hey, 5:30 is going to be the public safety meeting, 6 o'clock is going to be the finance, and then 6:30 you'll have smart growth.
The only one that starts on time is the first one. None of the others have started on time, more or less. If anything, you might want to break up the bulk of the heavy meetings on one night, but they don't start on time. Whether you put it second or third, it's not going to start on time because that's how the meetings go.
Depends on the. Whether it evens out in the end. At the end of the day, it's not quite fair.
I don't believe she is.
But it certainly doesn't hurt to, if you're going to be switching them, to switch them so, as Nicole said, so that they're next to each other. So no one person has to come sit through the others, although it doesn't hurt to sit through them or come later. And so that they're, concurrent, one after the other. But just to flip them because, I mean, right now, smart growth is going through a lot, but for a long time, it was finance that we were just going through a lot with. So it alternates back and forth.
Which is why we have these discussions about reordering the meetings once a year. Right? That is why we have these discussions about reordering the meetings based on the agendas and the length of time that it takes to get through them.
So what's the aversion at the very least to put finance first, public safety second?
I'm fine with that.
But-
If you
yeah.
all want to do that, that would be fine. And then smart growth follows.
Is there a reason why public safety is first? I would open that up for discussion. I don't know, maybe if it had to do with our public servants needing to attend to something else.
I don't know. My only thought about why finance makes sense last is because there's often things that come up in the meetings prior, like about that, like public safety brings that they might want to buy a new fire truck and we approve it in public safety and then we financially approve it in finance. And there's a logic to that in my head that kind of works, right? Like before you approve the dollars, are we sure we want to buy this truck? But yeah.
Well, to Mr. McGinnis's point, and when I was the chair of finance, and Mr. Allen got on board with us, Mr. Metric and Miss Leonti, we had when Bill Scott was here as well, we had a very heavy load to carry because we weren't really organized financially. And with Mr. Metric's help, that we've been able to actually streamline a lot of our events that go on. And with Barb now in charge of finance, there's not that gigantic delay of not knowing what's happening. So the efforts of Mr. Metric and Ms. Leonti, that's why the finance meetings aren't running as long as they used to, because we were disorganized during those 3 or 4 years that I was running the finance team. Now it's streamlined with the organizational skills of Metric. And that's why I think the meetings run a lot quicker in finance because the organizational skills are there now. And Barb has the answers now where she was learning the job at that point, and now she's on top of the game. So it's streamlined. So.
And we did this before where it was flipped. And the reason being is because of the exact reason that you mentioned. The meetings were taking well over an hour. Right. And the Smart Growth Committee meeting never started on time ever. So I think it's only right that we just flip back.
Well, I'm personally fine with the flip. I mean, it sounds like we're, for perhaps, I don't know where Sheila is on this, but it sounds like we'll probably move this to, not to consent, but for further discussion tomorrow evening.
I would recommend, since she doesn't have a voice, at the very least, if it sounds like it's okay around here and it sounds like the direction it's going to go is a flip is going to be approved, right? Based off of what I'm hearing up here, I would at least recommend that if we're going to approve some kind of flip, that we put finance, public safety, and smart growth.
I'm fine with that. If you want to make an amendment, we'll vote on that. I'm okay with that. Are you okay?
Yeah. I'm okay with that too. We could amend the motion.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So what we would like to do is amend the motion that's on the table currently, or recommend, it's the motion, well, actually this committee recommendation to move to consent agenda. So would we now move this to discussion, or can we amend this recommendation?
And
We can't vote on it tonight, I know that.
I guess I have a question. What was wrong with having smart growth first when people were here to talk about it? When the audience was here, because you get, not that we have much audience tonight, but then you get the trickling off. I mean, what was wrong with doing smart growth then finance, then public safety, or
Well, I think for public safety to ask, the fire department chief, EMS, ambulance to wait for, perhaps 2.5 hours if it's a long smart growth meeting. I don't think that's fair.
they get to an actual.
Unfortunately, you never know what time it's going to be. I mean, a smart growth meeting could be, 45 minutes, it could be 2 hours. So if I were one of them, I'd want to be here on time. I mean, there's no guarantee of what that time is. So I think flipping it so that, finance, public safety, and then smart growth is probably the appropriate order. So we'll amend it and move it to tomorrow.
Yeah, as long as the members, as long as there's no dissenting member of council present to that amended motion you just said, finance and revenue, going in the order of finance and revenue, public safety, smart growth, then this council tonight can move it to consent.
I'm fine with that.
Just for detail's sake, also recognize that we are moving, this motion also includes moving the Borough Council May meeting dates back one day because we scheduled the work session on the primary. So we want to move that back. Primary, we'll do the work session Wednesday night and the voting session Thursday night that week because the primary is Tuesday night.
That seemed to be the easier one. I was going to bring that up afterwards since this was sort of a double-barreled motion. But yes, we were also proposing moving that meeting back due to the conflict.
We have consent on that item.
So yes.
Okay, sounds weird.
Finance.
Correct.
All right, next item. Approve the amendments to the rules and procedures of Borough Council. There's an attachment. I don't know if we can bring that attachment up. We spoke about this in multiple committee meetings and with Borough Council in December. There were just two items that we wanted to revisit through this document. Again, this is our rules. This is not a legal document, but this is the rules in terms of how we engage and how we our procedures for running council meetings and also committee selection. We, for discussion, there was an item, a requirement that we had discussed earlier last year before we were making changes to agenda to align more with Robert's rules around bringing up new items that are not administrative, more complex items. The Penrose item, I think, was what sort of kicked this whole discussion off about bringing those up twice before a vote. So in other words, they would have to be discussed in committee. They would have to be discussed at council and then discussed at committee again before vote. We decided not to do that. It was potentially creating too long between a discussion and not everything needs to go through that process. I feel like some of the other changes that we made in terms of the agenda management also helped resolve potential issues that we were dealing with. So we made the recommendation to not require two consecutive discussions for new items that were not of administrative nature. So we struck that language. The second piece was around the securing vacancies for boards and commissions. And the recommendation earlier was to remove language because it was redundant. The mayor brought up the fact last December that we should leave that in regardless of whether it was redundant. The committee agreed, so we were going to leave the language in around the filling positions and vacancies. So those two changes the committee agreed to with a recommendation of 3-0 to add to consent agenda.
Okay, any comments, council? Any public comment? Okay, sounds like we have consent on approving those amendments to the rules and procedures. Item 3.
Okay, item 3 was discussing the membership terms to the TAC members, the Transportation Advisory Committee, the new committee that we put in place, and we have an amendment to that tomorrow. So the issue is that we needed to stagger the terms in accordance with the recommendation from the Transportation Committee. And we also wanted to address the appointees, which I have a list here that we mentioned in our committee meeting, which is John O'Brien, head of downtown Westchester, Ray Ott, Jim Wiley, Patricia Shields, Laura McLean, and Liz Young, who is the liaison with the Westchester Rail Restoration Committee. I just met with this committee. They're actually in their first meeting tonight, appointing officers and starting to talk through sort of their vision. We have a talented team. I'm really proud of how quickly this came together, and I'm just really happy to see that we have some experience on the team too. People that have had some experience on TMAC or and just in transportation in general. So feel really good about it. The committee recommended the appointment, and they're discussing their terms tonight, which we can also put in the ordinance for tomorrow.
But the issue that we're discussing tonight is the staggering 2- and 3-year terms.
That is what they're discussing tonight. Yes.
Okay.
So is there something that we need? Is there something? Is this on?
I think when we, I don't know that we can actually put this to consent tonight because we don't know what their terms are going to be. So we'll have to discuss it again tomorrow. So I think we'll just put this on the agenda for a discussion item. And once we understand which of these 6 members want to stagger, or which are going to be serving 2-year terms and which are going to be serving 3-year terms, then we can put this in place.
So it
we'll-
sounds like this will go back to committee.
It'll
next
go,
month.
no, actually, we can put it on the discussion for tomorrow night,
Okay.
once we know what those terms are. Is that correct?
That's correct. Council makes the appointments for the terms, and
Yep.
since this is a brand new committee, they're discussing the terms right now. So it's just housekeeping. So you'll just approve the appointments for the term.
Yeah.
term.
It's a little confusing because we had a hearing to make some amendments to the ordinance that we missed the first time, or we discussed, but we didn't include it. They're having their first meeting tonight and they're discussing terms. So tomorrow night, we'll have the item actually to discuss and make a motion to appoint.
So they'll have their chair appointed tomorrow, and that person will come to council tomorrow to tell us what they,
No, I'll
where
tell
they
you.
landed.
I'll put it on the agenda.
We'll tee it up.
And we,
It is, and I even put that in my email. We're just tying up loose ends. Then after tonight, they'll be ready to go. Well, it's going to be a council decision. You're going to make that appointment tomorrow night. You're going to approve their term limits. Yes.
Just a correction, the hearing did happen. The committee's in place. That's why they're meeting tonight. We made an amendment to
Yeah,
make some
that's what I
requirements. Yeah.
The amendment. So in fact, it's not complete, correct? Or am I incorrect?
It'll be complete tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night.
Yes.
But this is, the terms are not part of the language in the ordinance itself. It is, okay.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Got it. So who's going to take 2? Who's going to take 3? That's what we have to decide.
Exactly. And they're discussing that right now.
So that's what they're deciding. Okay. Thank you, Dana, for making that clear.
It's confusing.
Test.
It works. Okay, any other comments this evening? Okay, so number 4.
Yeah, so the next item here is a motion to approve the interview process for boards, committees, and commissions. And a lot of this had to do with, there were different operating procedures depending on what board and commission you were in, whether or not we being council had some say in the interview process. What this is doing is this is essentially just aligning the interview process to essentially the boards and commissions will do the interviews, make recommendations that we will then vote on. And I think the bid had a different process, and we felt that that was the process that we should follow for the rest of the boards and commissions. So this is just a little bit of housekeeping, administrative, trying to align some of the other committees to follow the same process.
So Ms. Dorsey isn't here, but I'll relay her concern regarding this was that we want to make sure that, say we get 15 resumes, we want to be able to ensure that we're getting a diverse population that is filling these boards and commissions. And if it goes directly to the board or commission to make that decision and give us a recommendation, are we getting the best possible and, diverse candidates? So I would agree with her. But on the other hand, keeping it consistent between the boards is nice. And, sometimes we get 10 candidates that we've got to interview. It would be nice to have some say from the actual board or commission. I mean, we still have final say in whomever it is. So,
Can I?
yeah.
Yeah, so I also thought that Lisa's comment, I kind of agree with that as well. I think it's, as opposed to just having everybody go straight to the board and commissions, it's good to have us with knowing our different wards and our different wards' needs to have the opportunity to hear the candidates and also provide our opinions. And I would also say if someone on the board or commissions or committees would like to weigh in, they know when the interviews are and they can come up and say any recommendations or email us or do a whole lot of other things to allow us to know that they think this person comes with a great perspective or what have you. I think I heard you say you want to align with what BID does, but BID's not really part of our commissions or boards. So I'm not really concerned about aligning with what BID does because, they're a great entity and they do a lot for the community, but they're not really borough administration. They're kind of tertiary. So I would, I don't think we have to align with them if, is my own personal opinion. And I do appreciate having all the interview process and hearing directly from the candidates ourselves, as opposed to just having them not even knowing who they are because they just kind of become a name.
I'm just going to disagree. I believe that it should go through with those various committees because those committees know those people the best. We, in fact, could always put a word into those committees on behalf of those people, whether they be in our ward or not, or if we know those people. I do think that carries weight. But as Brian said, I think the bid does a pretty good process.
To your point, Mr. McGinnis and Mr. McCoy, prime example this evening. And it's consistent with every time we do an interview. Tonight, I asked a question about Dewey Decimal System because I didn't want the guy figuring we weren't interested in him. I asked the question, are you going to be available for travel? Most times this committee, Borough Council, never asks any pertinent questions of any of the candidates. by going to the boards and commissions, they would be more in depth into what their committees actually do and do a better job asking questions and getting interviews. I'm not saying that the committee should just send us one. They should probably send us two people if they have qualified two people, not just one person coming. But they, like, for example, the planning commission. If you're not in construction or you don't understand zoning or you don't understand building and housing, we're not going to be able to ask the questions of these people to make sure that we fester out the right person. The committees can, recreation's the same, all the committees are the same. But they have a better feel. But council has the ability and the obligation to select the person. But I think it should go to the boards and commissions, let them do it, and have them make a recommendation based on, their overall experience of what the people are bringing. So that's just my play on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with that. And I think as long as we're getting all the resumes of the candidates that they are interviewing, and we can, anyone here can have our opinion made at the board or commission level. And at the end of the day, we do have final decision. So I'm good with moving this forward.
I still am, oh, sorry. I still am not. I still want to think, I'm not sure I'm there. I think, again, if the committees and commissions are that vested in who's getting on their committees and commissions, they can show up at our meeting or email us or do other things, which they also haven't done. And just because I haven't asked a question doesn't mean, truthfully, I wanted to ask a question. I didn't ask you the question I had because I didn't ask Ms. Polk the question. My question would have been, what would you do to change? What improvements do you think need to be made for the library board? That's actually the question, but I didn't ask Ms. Polk. So I was like, I can't, she's not here to bring her back up to ask her. So I didn't ask that tonight, but questions do come to mind. And these are things that I'd want to know. And I want to see the resume. I want to see the person and I want to know. And again, if the committee is that vested, they know our emails, they know how to contact us. So I'm not ready to put this on consent and say that I'm okay without some more thoughts and discussion on this.
Do you want
That's
to,
fine.
do you want to kick it back to committee to discuss again and take your comments or is there some other approach you would?
Yeah, I
suggest?
think it would, I guess take it back. I mean, I know Lisa also had some opinions and maybe it's something to talk through with her as well. I don't know what Sheila's thoughts were on this, but yeah, I think it takes.
And frankly, we don't have any vacancies coming up to fill for a bit. The planning commission, right?
Yeah, and I'm, hey. Yeah, my planning commission.
Well, at the end of the day, we still have final interview with the candidates they recommend. So, but understood. Sounds like we'll table, move back to
So
committee.
I guess I have two questions. Sean, what does the home rule charter say about this? I mean, I guess I'm trying to understand why we're looking to change it. Has this system not worked? Have we not had good candidates? Has council been picking bad candidates? I mean, what's going on that we need to change it? And what does the home rule charter say about it? I mean, are we just changing it because you don't want the responsibility? Why is council changing it? And what does the home rule charter say? I'm sorry, you can't answer the first one, but you can answer the second one. I'm sorry.
The home rule charter and admin code, I don't know where it sits, is pretty clear. It's council's vote that appoints people to committees. It's real clear.
And the reason it came up was in discussions, we had a lot of candidates for, I don't know, 8 different boards this particular month or two. And it came up between, actually Dana and I were discussing it and felt like it would, we don't really get the input from the committees and boards. So, with the library board specifically, they did give us a recommendation early on. I said, we haven't had that before, so seemed like something to consider. And that's why I went to committee.
Understood. So I guess, for instance, Planning Commission, and if we get 2 or 3 candidates for that, it seems like it would be, a no-brainer to choose the candidate that has that background, who has that building, architectural background, and if we get one that has that background. But it also seems possible that a council person, could call someone on that committee or whatever committee we're talking about and saying, what are you looking for? Just to get a heads up of if they're looking for, someone from a different area of the town, I think, or someone that brings a different skill set they're looking for. I mean, I just think that as council people, you all have your finger on the pulse more than some of the commissions do in a broader understanding of it, but perhaps I'm wrong.
I mean, I think just in the efficiency of time, if we have 8 openings or 8 committees with 15 openings, I personally don't have the time to talk to every person on each one of those boards and commissions to hear their thoughts. So having them talk about it at one of their work sessions and bring it back in terms of here are top, as Bernie said, 2 recommendations, I'm fine with that. I don't have, hours to
The
spend
committee,
on
the
that.
committee was fine with it too. We felt that it made sense for an efficiency perspective and perhaps also a specialization perspective where I might not know what questions to ask because I don't know anything about libraries. But the library board would have a lot of knowledge about that and they would be better suited to select their candidates and recommend a candidate versus me trying to determine that.
Yeah, I also think that it takes away visibility from the community on who we're putting on our boards and commissions if they're kind of done behind the scenes at committee level versus where the committees are not videoed, you can't watch it later. You can't understand what's going on if you miss it. So there is also a visibility factor of having someone come and interview and talk about what they've done and for people, for awareness for what the committees are, what people do, and again, who's on it. Just there's that aspect to it also that is a benefit from having potential candidates come to the podium and talk about themselves and why they want to be on the committee.
And they will still be doing that. Whoever, if there are 2 candidates that a board and commission is recommending, they still need to come before council to be interviewed and selected.
Yeah, and I just don't agree with that. I don't think it's fair. Like, I'd rather see all the candidates that are interested come before us. And we could talk to the board.
Mr. McCoy, is this on discussion for tomorrow evening?
It is.
Okay.
Or is it going back to the committee?
This is going back to committee. Yep.
Going back to committee.
Okay, number 5, motion to appoint board engineers, planning consultant, independent auditor, and solicitor legal counsel. We, as a committee, agreed to retain all of our current consultants, legal advisors, services, engineers, planning, and auditor.
Okay, any comments, council? Any public comments or questions? Okay, sounds like we have consent. Moving on to Public Works Committee.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. A motion to approve the connection management plan and corrective action plan for submittal to the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. This is basically a first step that the engineers had to do to pull together a building plan and a proposal to go to the DEP for preliminary approval, which could take up to 3 to 4 months. And the corrective plan, we had to put together a corrective plan as well for them to review. So so when we do start building the new sewer system, a new pipe on Maple Alley, the most popular alley in the borough. The DEP has a very large say in it, and this is, it'll take quite a while for the DEP to go through it. So there was a 3-0 recommendation, and the presentation was by the engineer who actually developed the entire plan.
And if I understood it correctly, this also allows us to provide EDUs to, smaller projects as we move forward to get the actual.
Yes,
plan.
there are some properties inside, thank you. There are some properties inside the borough that cannot connect to our sewer system right now because we're at the maximum level. And by the DEP giving us the permission to move forward, it allows us to take on the smaller properties that want to join in and switch the usage out of their buildings.
Great. Any comments, questions in council? Any public comments or questions? Okay, looks like we have consent for that. Moving on.
All right, discussion and recreation programming and administration. I see that Mr. Karowski's not here, so.
Yeah, I'd like to table that. Mr. Karowski will be back tomorrow, so this is something that we could refer, if the
Okay,
president
move this
agrees, to committee, and we can
Move this to discussion for tomorrow evening or committee for next
be
week?
back to, did I say tomorrow? I meant Thursday. He's
Yeah.
coming back on Thursday. My apologies.
Okay, so we'll move this back to committee.
The motion to approve the contract to purchase a new recycling truck. That was a 3-0 recommendation. We are not going to sell our existing recycling truck because the chances of things breaking during the season, but Mr. Edwards would like to have a backup there for doing other work around the yard. And this is all CoStar's approved from the state of Pennsylvania.
Comments or questions? Public comments? Okay, consent? Moving on to smart growth.
Okay, motion to direct the solicitor to attend a zoning hearing for 236 West Bernard Street. This is related to a location that had students in their home and we're working through the process there. So the committee did recommend that the solicitor attend the hearing for this location.
Any comments, questions? Public comments, questions? Okay, with that to consent.
Okay, motion for no solicitor attendance at the zoning hearing for 323 West Biddle Street. The applicant, as you can see here, requests variance relief for their building. They would like to build like a sunroom off the back. They're asking for a 6-foot variance so that they can make it slightly bigger for their child that has some disabilities, that they want to be able to give them more space to move around. We all felt that they should be able to, that 6 foot wasn't going to go into any, encroach on anything. It was on their property. And so we felt that we didn't need a solicitor there to do anything against that. We were okay with that, the solicitor not being there. That said, the solicitor's going to be at the meeting anyway, because it'll probably happen the same time the 236 West Bernard Street meeting happens. So if any talk beyond the 6 foot comes up, she's there for that, but we were okay with the 6 foot that they were asking for.
Okay, any comments or questions?
One comment on this one, since Ms. Shimoni brought up the disability aspect of the applicant. I just want to be very clear. If anyone in the borough ever comes forward and has a disability accommodation that's needed for the residents and so forth, we do not make those people go and get zoning hearings for ramps and things like that. There's a principle of reasonable accommodation that accommodates Americans with disabilities. It's a federal law. And so this dimensional variance is actually that and a little bit more, sticking into that 6 feet. But if anybody ever had to build a ramp that was in the front yard setback, for instance, we could do that by right. So I just want to be very clear. We're not making people with disabilities go through red tape.
Thank you. Appreciate the clarification. Any public comments or questions? Okay, moving on.
And then we had some HARB improvements. HARB had approved these items with maybe some slight variations, but they had approvals and the committee agreed with these two going forward.
Any comments, questions? Public comments? Okay, we'll move this to consent.
Okay, motion to approve contract with Building Inspection Underwriters of Pennsylvania and appoint Kyle Bendler, BCO, as Assistant Building Code Official and Assistant Zoning Officer. And again, the committee recommends that we move forward here.
Comments or questions?
How long is the contract?
And this is on a as-needed basis or a certain number of hours per week? Okay, thank you.
So if you get your department fully staffed.
Well, the contract would remain on an as-needed basis in case of another emergency, even if we were fully staffed, if there was a medical emergency and we were to lose a staff again on medical leave or something, it's good to have an assisting building code official in place to turn to. But we would not be paying him unless we used his service.
So on an as-needed basis, we need them zero, then we don't pay. So it's a rate that's fixed in for the year is what I'm
Yes.
gathering. Okay.
Mr. McCoy, to the mayor's point, the apartment inspections, we have 4,929 apartments. Are these people going to be involved in going to the apartments and doing the inspections for the borough since our staff is short?
That's a great question. I have a meeting with them tomorrow to discuss that. We're still at the initial discussion level. This contract does not cover that. This contract is specifically for building code services and zoning services, but that is a possible future avenue.
And could you come to the committee sometime? Well, we're meeting tomorrow night, so if you have any information for us tomorrow night, it'd be really helpful if we move forward in that footprint, because we need to start getting these apartments inspected. And the 1.5 people you have in your department just isn't going to get the project done. And we have an obligation to the residents of the borough that paid the $44. And they're expecting their buildings to be inspected one way or another in 2025. And to the mayor's point, it sounds like we need to have somebody or someone or some organization doing these inspections on a regular basis to get through the 4,900 of them.
Correct, and I agree. And hopefully I'll have a contract to bring to Smart Growth in February.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Public comments? Okay. Moving on to number 5.
Motion to direct solicitor to amend Chapter 66, Housing and Property Maintenance, 1000.2 definitions, residential rental dwelling unit. I could kind of there's like different levels of how we can interpret what these rentals are, and the committee landed on wanting the strict definition of what is required for a rental permit, and it has to do with it's related to if you buy a home and you put your child in there and they have their friends, like you still need your child to like pay you like $1 rent or something, but it's like an official rental. And we wanted to make sure that our definition made that a rental property just as much as all the other properties. And it's really from a safety standpoint, because then we know what our rentals are, things are getting inspected and all of those things. And so we wanted to hold the more strict definition. Oh, yes. Yeah. And any flavor you guys want to add?
Yeah, so any dwelling unit where the owner of the property does not live there full-time will be considered a rental, and they will have to apply for a rental permit pay the $44 and have an inspection.
So I just have a comment on this, or maybe it's a question. The language that's currently in this ordinance, I thought was pretty clear that it was already kind of abiding by the what we're calling the strict definition, which is if you own the property, you don't reside there, and somebody else does, you need to have a rental agreement. That seemed pretty clear to me. So I didn't know what we're amending.
Yeah, there's an and or an or somewhere in the paragraph that needs to come out because it made it sound like if, I forget what the language is, but if it's a relative and so there's any dwelling unit within the borough which is occupied by someone other than the owner of the property as determined by the most current deed and for which the owner of the said property received any value.
Really that last clause that would come out, because I hear what you're saying. It's pretty clear there, but with family members, relatives, friends, that sort of creates a gray area with that final clause. And that's really all we'd be doing, I think.
That's my understanding of it. And it also, I mean, it's important because, you know, if it's a student, for instance, they may only be there for 2 years or 3 years. And then obviously the parents aren't going to sell the house when the child leaves. So it is going to become a rental, presumably, or most likely will. We don't know. But this is the safe avenue to make sure that it becomes a rental property that's inspected.
Thanks for the clarification.
Any public comments or questions? Okay, we'll move that to consent and move on to finance.
This would be a motion to approve items A through F that were voted on 3-0. Atlantic Heavy Duty, which $313,045.02 for a trash recycling truck. Civic Plus, $12,420. That's software for the Westchester Borough meetings. Grancius, $19,256.48. That's permitting and licensing system. OpenGov, $28,614.96. That's asset management system that Mr. Frink and the borough uses. USALCO, $12,540. That's phosphorus removal. And finally, Lewis Environmental, $11,473.75. And that was for an environmental cleanup that happened over the holidays.
Thank you. I just have one question. I see Mr. Edwards here. Is Lewis Environmental done or great? Problem solved. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Public comments? Okay, we can move that to consent, please. And is there any other business?
Mr. McCoy, for your pleasure. During the past month, we've had some discussions and it stemmed from Parks and Recreation about the signature on the pickleball and who signed the pickleball contract. And we've had discussions offline and online with Mr. Metric. But to get complete clarification, and Mr. Metric has to opine on the comment, under the administrative code and the Borough Council, and the Borough, I mean, Section 502, powers and duties. Now, under J, and we can clear this up once and for all, who's allowed to sign contracts in the borough? But under J, it cause to be signed all deeds, contracts, and other instruments subject to their approval by Borough Council, if so provided in this chapter. The way I read this, Mr. Metric, under his administrative code, needs to sign all the contracts that we have in the borough. Now, there is a caveat because there always is in government, because it's called the escape route. And it says that the borough manager may assign or designate. So I would like to ask Mr. Metric how he plans on moving forward so we don't have to cross this bridge again with signed contracts and who's able to sign contracts. Because it clearly says here that he's supposed to sign all contracts that the Borough Council approves.
Since I've been asked, I don't think cause to sign is the same thing as sign, but I'd like to, let's put this issue to bed and get a solicitor opinion on it. Is that a good way forward?
Excellent. Yeah, it's this way here, everyone knows whether you got to put an initial on something or you don't. And and if not,
Well, are all police contracts of the borough too?
you sign them.
Okay.
You sign them. You sign all of. Let's get the solicitor, because I can pick and choose, like, going to the grocery store, what you decide you want to be involved in and what you don't want to be involved in. So I don't feel comfortable. This is a editorial. I personally don't feel comfortable of an employee that doesn't have a position in the borough to sign any contracts for the borough if they're legal and binding. That's the word I'm going to use, legal and binding. If they're not legal and binding, anybody can sign them. I'm okay with it. But if something's legal and binding, I think either the finance director or the borough manager should have an initial on the contract.
So I'll weigh in just because I have
Okay.
an opinion. So, I mean, I think when you read that too, it says approval by Borough Council. So not all of those contracts that were signed actually needed to be approved by Borough Council. There was one because I think it went to $11,000 or something like that. So there's a gray area there. But I think all this stems back from the Parks and Rec conversation that we had. And my opinion is whether Keith signed it or not wouldn't be my conversation point on that. My conversation point that came up from that call out from our resident is more, what's our process for getting activities into our parks? And can we do a better job? Can we, as opposed to, it sounds like right now it's just somebody has a pickleball, teaches pickleball, or somebody teaches baseball or something, and they come to us and they say, hey, I got an idea. I teach pickleball or baseball. Would you guys mind if I signed a contract with you to teach at the parks? And we're like, sure. But we don't necessarily go out and find whether or not that person's the people we even want baseball or pickleball, or if that's the best provider of pickleball or baseball, and there's probably, opportunity to do a little bit more recon or work proactively when it comes to getting these types of business to supplement our offerings to our borough residents. And so I'd rather take it back to Keith and say, hey, Keith, now that you've kind of gotten in there, you got an extra guy, you're rolling now in people on your, on your team. But no, what could be a better way to improve the process to make it more proactive in order to address the residents' needs? And we've got the Parks and Recs consultants that are in here, and they're looking at things. And so maybe it's more just, is there a better way to run that process to give the best offerings to our residents? And it's not necessarily who signs the contract. It's just, can we be more proactive about it?
I respectfully disagree with the contract signature. If a contract is legal and binding and the borough's on the hook for the money, somebody that's responsible for the money should sign or initial the contract. Because, an employee can be held no harm and just be disciplined or released from their position, where because we've had that before. We've had that before in the millions of dollars. So it's very touchy for me because of the issues that we had a few years back with a contract that somebody agreed to that the borough manager didn't know anything about.
I think it would be wise to have the solicitor look at this. In this particular case, the $11,000 invoice came in, as I understand it, because the person that we were contracting with didn't bill us for 4 months or 6 months or whatever. So the contract was to provide an hour's worth of service and for an 80-20 split. So if it's $100 an hour, the contract was for, for the borough to get pay for $20 an hour. So, I mean, it looks like it's something that exceeded the 10,000, but in reality, he's providing an hourly service that should have been paid monthly, invoiced and paid monthly. It wasn't. But I agree. Let's have the solicitor, take a look at this and opine on it.
Can I just say one other thing? I know, sorry, I know you're trying to squash. But the other piece of it is I hear you, Bernie, that not everyone should be able to sign a contract, but directors of departments are not just anyone. And I think there's an empowerment factor that we also have to consider. I mean, yes, we'll see what the solicitor says too. But I mean, if you run a corporation, I work for Comcast. Brian Roberts does not sign every contract that goes through the Comcast Corporation, right? Like there are certain levels of contract signing that happens.
Now you're really on the tree.
No, I mean, it's.
I can tell you, if you want to take one more step, Ms. Leonti, please refresh my memory. How much did we have to pay that we didn't have contracted for? Was it 1.2 million?
I'm
that one of
assuming
our employees signed for?
you're referencing a prior construction company?
Yeah, the construction company, yeah.
Yeah, that was in over $1 million.
Yeah. An employee signed it. An employee didn't tell anybody. An employee did it. The borough manager didn't know it. Finance director didn't know it. The director of public works didn't know it. So I'm a little bit salty about letting people sign a legal and binding contract. And that year it blew up our budget and we had a lot of egg on our face because no one knew what happened. So.
I mean, to Nicole's point, I mean, typically there's an approval matrix of, if you're a department head level, you can sign a contract up to $500 or whatever it is. So this is going to go to committee, I assume, at some point. It's going to go to the solicitor for opinion, but after that, it will move into, I presume, act or
Maybe
finance.
finance, because it's dollar thresholds. We're talking about signing authority and
Right.
such. So I would think it might be finance committee. We
I
can
think
stuff
that
in act,
anything-
though.
Right, to your point, I think that anything, I mean, we already have here in place, anything that over $10,000 has to get reviewed. I think that everything over $10,000 should be reviewed and signed probably by Mr. Metric. Under that threshold, maybe goes to those particular departments with the advice and consent of Mr. Metric, so he has the knowledge of what's going on. I think that's a simple way to solve it.
Okay, well, this came up under other business anyway, so appreciate the comment, everyone's thoughts on it. With that, we will adjourn the meeting at 7:45. Thank you.